Hey guys, welcome to the Sonic series. We're talking about 20 Sonic games here, these are the ones. Superstars is now, let's get this over with. Despite what that intro may have implied to you, I actually kinda like Sonic Superstars. Dare I say it's a good game. The only reason I sounded so bored is because what is there to say about this one? Call this a bold claim, but it's the new Super Mario Bros. Of this franchise to me. A solid, well-done game for sure, just not really one that brings anything super interesting to the table. It's a shame too, as this entry clearly tried its damn hardest to stand out, what with all the new things it does add to the classic formula, yet not a single one leaves its mark and cements it as a mainstay. I've honestly struggled a lot writing this intro alone purely because of how little there is to say about it. Thanks to that, however, I don't got too much work on my hands, so why not jump into things, huh? Sonic Superstars is pretty darn good, and here's why. As with previous classic Sonic videos in this series, the main meat of this discussion is the level design. The controls of Sonic and Friends don't really change between entries, and because the controls are extremely tight and responsive, all that's left to really go in depth on are the levels themselves. To be honest though, I don't really know how to feel generally about these ones. It's a pretty mixed bag overall, albeit with one major factor across most levels which makes me think less of all of them, but we'll get to that when we get there, so let's not waste any more time. Bridge Island is about what you'd expect from a first zone in a classic Sonic title. It's very reminiscent of Green Hill design-wise, in that there are obvious deviations and a clear top, bottom, and middle path. There's a great flow to this level, even if you're not the greatest at 2D Sonic, a big part of that thanks to the drop dash. I really love the unique set dressing incorporated into this level as well. Going up the walls and into the background are really memorable and fun moments, despite automation being very clear. Now, I don't have a major problem with these segments thankfully, as they're still fun to watch and stuff, so yeah, a bit too generic with its theme unfortunately, but always a great one to revisit whenever I get the itch to. Speed Jungle lives up to its name as the zone I always remember when this game comes to mind. Now, I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece, but the mechanics all work insanely well to me, almost like if Sonic CD was way more about speed than exploration. The vines that push you forward are super fun and they play with this a lot, the other vines that throw you into the air are a blast too, and there is a sense of adrenaline not felt in any other level in this game. This zone is also where the character exclusive acts are introduced, being exactly what they sound like, an optional level forcing you to play as a certain character, usually designed around their unique moveset. I actually quite like this idea, but I think a little more fine-tuning was necessary for it to work great. Instead of simply giving you the option once you reach the goal, how about hiding a secret exit somewhere in the level, a la New Super Mario Bros. This would encourage exploration whilst not forcing those speed junkies into them. Maybe tying the secret exit to that character's special moves would be ideal, even if it would be hard to do so for someone like Sonic or Amy. Heck, I think a larger focus on secret exits in Sonic levels would be a really interesting experiment, and possibly could have given this game a greater identity, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Act Sonic, as it's so aptly named, is focused on those speedy vines mentioned earlier whilst you're being chased by Fang the Weasel the whole time. Love they brought him back, by the way. His antics with the fancy new character are wonderfully charming. This is a linear, semi-automated romp, sure, but most certainly a fun one, and Act the Sniper's constant barrage of attacks definitely helps things. Act 2 features these segments where a butterfly lights a small radius around you, and it's whatever. Doesn't really add anything, and more so just annoys you, but not enough to make me hate it. Overall, Speed Jungle is a great time, and takes the cake for my favourite level in the game, which only means it's downhill from here. Sky Temple is mostly fun. It sort of feels like a poor man's Sky Sanctuary, which is clearly what it was inspired by, and there's nothing it does to truly feel like its own thing. The fact there's only a single act here too really sours the memorability here. There's a lot of unique mechanics implemented here, such as the wind, these Arkanoid-like areas, and these blocks that create a path when you stand on them. So I feel like this level is probably stripped down to just one act with an extended length and lots of mechanics due to time constraints or something. It wouldn't be a first for this franchise, let me tell ya. I would have much rather had two acts with one focused on wind lasting around 3 minutes, and the other focusing on the snake blocks. There's a ton they could have done with these ideas that are simply not possible to perform together in a single level. Plus, the general design of the latter mechanic doesn't really fit well with the ancient Sky Temple theming. It may seem like I hate this level, what with all the complaining and stuff, but I honestly do have good fun here, even if it's not anything I can't get somewhere else. Whilst we're here, the special stages are amongst the latter half of favourites to me. They're great. You have to swing around this environment, attaching yourself to these balls to chase down the Chaos Emerald, and it can get decently challenging. As long as you understand what's what, you will more than likely figure it out before long. It's a fun time. Doing these special stages is actually more warranted than in all other 2D Sonics, as each emerald unlocks a new special power to use in certain locations within the main levels. This is almost a slam dunk of a concept, as I can see in any other universe these powers being great and really fun. We're not in that one though. The problem boils down to the fact that the game explicitly tells you exactly what power to use whenever you reach a certain point. This actively discourages players to experiment with the powers, as you can't use them again until you hit a checkpoint, leading to them waiting for when the pop-up appears to do the cool thing, then move on. Simply removing these pop-ups would give players a lot more confidence to experiment, which is partially what Sonic's all about, right? Anyways, back on topic, despite the glaring flaws with Sky Temple, I still think there's a lot to love here. It's pretty nice. Pinball Carnival sounds like a recipe for disaster due to the name alone. A pinball carnival? Well, what it actually does is combine the carnival aesthetic of Carnival Night from Sonic 3 and Knuckles with the pinball gameplay of Casino Night, ultimately making for a shockingly fun time. Obviously, the random nature of a lot of it does get annoying, as with any pinball-themed level, but not only are there some super cool set pieces like this huge firework fiesta, I also really enjoy the new mechanics it brings to the table, like these rings you shoot out of and these panels that give you rings if you pass them. I'm more mixed on Act 2, however, as it utilizes this roller coaster mechanic which is a little too similar to the Vines of Speed jungle for my taste. It's definitely more gimmick-coded than an actual part of the level, unlike those vines. Not saying it doesn't fit into the level, it's just not as enjoyable as those vines for me. It also wasn't explained super well exactly what you're supposed to do at first glance, just, yeah. A fun level I wouldn't hate replaying, just not an immediate pick. This game definitely suffers a lot from the zones not feeling super distinct from previous ones, as Lagoon City feels like a different flavoured Hydrosity. Even the names are basically the same, man, come on. That doesn't mean there isn't any fun to be had here though, as there's some good choices made. For one, the water is treated as a punishment path, leading to it only being interacted with if you play bad. It doesn't take long to get out of it too, leading to the level feeling just as fast-paced as all the others. I also enjoy the water spouts, the abundance of water slides, and the chill aesthetic. As opposed to the other optional solo acts, Lagoon City's Amy Act is mandatory, probably due to its significance to the story. This level's really solid and memorable thanks to the abundance of fruits. It does kinda suck needing to push these crates super slowly, but they only slow the pace a teensy bit. The overall level is super fun. I really enjoy the section towards the end when your movement is restricted thanks to holding Trip in your arms, even if the movement is a bit awkward to get used to. This is Trip, by the way, they're the fancy new character mentioned previously. Say hello. Act 2 is more of the same, more or less, just with a larger focus on the water. A well-designed and fun level for sure, just... the Hydrosity's right there, man. Sand Sanctuary is another single-act zone, and it's... good. You know, I like it. These arrow zipline things are fun to utilize, and the snakes make for some memorable platforms. The same problem is raised as with Sky Temple though. Why just the one act? We all learned from Sonic 1 that 3 acts for one zone was a little too much, so 2 acts were made the norm to rectify this problem. Shortening it even further to just 1 simply makes the level even more forgettable than it already is, thanks to clearly taking heavy inspiration from Sandopolis. This is really all I can say about this one, unfortunately. It is a fun time for sure, but I would not really care if I ever replayed it ever again. Press Factory is where things get a bit zoinky for me, as I'm pretty sure I like the first act. I do really like the mechanic of the hydraulic press in the background slamming, making you jump a decent bit. There's a lot to be done with this idea for sure, and this level does make decent use of it in some interesting ways. Unfortunately, I think the level design itself takes a hit here and here onward, as it feels really formulaic if that makes sense. It feels more like I'm pressing buttons instead of exploring a location in a sense. For Act 2, I think it's more annoying than anything, sadly. It takes the Sandopolis Act 2 and Oil Ocean Mania Act 2 mechanic of needing to keep track of an ever-present timer throughout the level, but because of the generally weaker level design than those games, I don't really find it that enjoyable of a mechanic here. I wouldn't say that these acts are bad levels, they just aren't that fun when compared to their inspirations. Golden Capital is a weird one, as it sort of feels like a second pinball zone, with a much greater focus on rings. You can get a ton of rings in this level without even doing much, allowing for lots of supersonic time, which is probably the intention as this is the 8th zone of the game. What I do like about this zone is that it sort of feels psychedelic. I don't know, something about the flipping gravity mechanic and the general vibe of the level feels a bit uneasy to me, which I think kinda works. It feels like a Sonic 1 level is what I'm trying to get at here, and I like it. The solo Knuckles act here is pretty solid. It uses his glide in some cool ways, and I like the crumbling platforms. The only thing Act 2 really has going for it is the nighttime aesthetic, which I enjoy. Other than that, it's just more of the same, making for a decent level, but one I don't really care for. Cyber Station is easily one of the most memorable zones in the game, all thanks to the interesting ideas it presents to you. Not even 30 seconds in, your character model changes into a modernized pixelated version, and it looks super cool. The same thing will happen to all the enemies and the rings too. They were really committed to making this one stand out. You play as a jellyfish at certain points, a mouse too. This level is conceptually a slam dunk. So why is it not a slam dunk? Well, to be honest, the controls of the jellyfish form are kinda awkward and can lead to some unfair damage, and the design of the mouse segments kinda blows. This part in particular sucks because only one of the 4 vertical bars takes you the right way, and you can only tell which one it is once you reach the top. If you get hit once, do it all again, bozo. This level was so close to being the zone of the game, but these poor design choices lead me to disappointingly say that I'm not that big a fan. This is another single act zone too, are you kidding me? Frozen Base begins with you choosing either Act 1 or the Tails exclusive act. I chose the Tails level for some variety and thought it was pretty decent. It uses Tails' flight a ton alongside the main mechanics of the zone, making for a delightful romp. You probably won't catch me playing it ever again though. The main level is about as good, but what confuses me is that depending on what you choose, you can't play the other one in the main campaign unless you exit the stage and choose it on the map screen. Now I get that switching to Act 1 or the Tails Act at the end of either wouldn't necessarily make sense story-wise, but it would be super easy to slightly alter the cutscenes to allow you to play them all. This is just kinda stupid, but you know what is more stupid? Act 2. You're in a flying Eggman pod and you shoot down these weird flying thingies before moving on to 2 really easy bosses. This isn't fundamentally bad or anything, it's just 2.5 minutes of nothing, leading me to say that Frozen Base is probably the weakest zone in the game design-wise. Only one more to go, so let's cover... Egg Fortress is a decent final level. Doesn't do anything super wrong, but it doesn't do anything super right either. I guess I'm not a fan of these boring-ass elevator segments and these low-gravity moments, and there's a decent amount of automation, but it does at least keep my attention. I do really like the setup for Act 2, however. Eggman begins to reverse time, leading you to go back through the level you just explored, but backwards, with all the obstacles doing the reverse of what they did before. It's super great on paper, but I don't think it works well for a final level of the game, as it ultimately still is the same level, just the other way around. Good in concept, but kinda fails in execution, leaving a polarizing taste in your mouth at the end of the game. Yeah, I can't lie, I've really struggled to go in depth on certain aspects of the game here simply because it takes so much from previous entries and fails to bring anything new that sticks. At least with Sonic Heroes, I was able to talk about the controls and the bugs and stuff, but here, there's nothing to go in depth on. Well, okay, there are a decent few aspects of this game I have neglected to mention until now, so let's cover them. I wanna go to sleep, Jesus Christ. This will probably be the only other segment of the video, as explaining everything else I would want to say about this game can fit here, with arguably a few exceptions. Let's get the worst aspect of this game over and done with, the bosses. I'm sure at least a few people watching shivered at me even uttering that word, but let's do a quick fire round of all the bosses in the main game, as pretty much all of them are fine at best, miserable at worst. Let's just get this over with. Bridge Island Act 1, a simple chase segment, decently fun. Bridge Island Act 2. Easy attack patterns, not really that fun though. Still functions. Speed Jungle Act 1. Funny Bugman, boring attacks, easy as hell, not good. Speed Jungle Act 2. The design reminds me of the Omnidroid from The Incredibles, but that's really the only cool thing about it. Same shit, different day really. Sky Temple. Easy and boring attack patterns with semi-interesting platforming bits in between. Pinball Carnival Act 1. Stupid ass clown man, but honestly one of the better ones. Pinball Carnival Act 2. Spin on the circles, it's boring. Lagoon City Act 1. Silly jellyfish, it's okay. Lagoon City Act 2. Platform in water, it's barely tolerable. Sand Sanctuary. The first war of attrition the game presents. It's not explained well, takes forever to defeat, and it's extremely formulaic. It sucks. Press Factory Act 1. Funny Monkey does not save the slow attack patterns and uninteresting mechanics, it's bad. Press Factory Act 2. Weird, annoying Eggman mech that is somehow better than a lot of the previous ones. Golden Capital Act 1. Not explained super well, but ultimately not that difficult once you get it. Golden Capital Act 2. In what universe is this shit from? You just float on this thing for 5 straight minutes. No exaggeration. The most dragged out thing I have ever seen. Cyber Station. This boss replaced my kidneys. Imagine the Metal Sonic 5 from Generations, but with weird as hell telegraphs and almost impossible damage windows. This doesn't even take into account the second phase, which is arguably even worse. One of the worst fights in the game, and the franchise. Frozen Base Act 1, boring chase boss, one hit will kill you thanks to knockback, yippee. Egg Fortress Act 2, genuinely collects some of the worst aspects of Sonic boss fights into one, 0 redeeming qualities. Exceedingly long animations, super specific methods to avoid attacks, viscerally long length, 2 phases which both suck, and dying once takes you back to the start. Genuinely maybe my least favorite final boss in the franchise, it is that insufferable. This weight on my mind since December has now been lifted. I can finally rest assured knowing I have talked about all the bosses in this game. What do you mean there's a second campaign? To be blunt, I've not played through this thing, mainly because I refuse to. I got my mileage out of the main package here, and I've heard many horror stories about the final boss of that campaign, so I do not give a damn. I don't care if it'll change my opinion or not, I just want to be happy, man. Speaking of the other campaign though, it is focused on the new character, Trip. I really enjoyed Trip, she's just a shy little dinosaur girl, super solid character. The general story of the game too is quite charming and silly, which works for what the game is going for. Trip and Fang's interactions are fun and nice, and I like how Trip eventually changes sides thanks to Amy's kindness. Nothing in depth, but still fun to go through. That's about it for that, so let's get to the visuals. I am overall mixed on the decision to make this game in 3D. On one hand, I do think it does function in creating a unique style that works for what the developers intend. The game does not look bad visually, I just think it's extremely generic. There's only a select few locations in the game I remember for the visuals, because they try something unique, some examples being with Cyber Station and arguably Speed Jungle. Everything else feels like it leans far too into what the classics did, without bringing anything new to stand out. I honestly blame a lot of the blandness of the game on the fact that it is in a 3D style, as it makes the game sort of blend in with other 2D platformers, especially the new Super Mario Bros. Games. Those games are all basically the same, and are what I keep referring to here as it feels like Superstars is in the same boat. The thing is though, Mario Wonder came literally 3 days after Superstars, and that game found its own way of creating a unique visual style to Super Mario that 1, looks absolutely incredible, and 2, is in 3D. What could the developers of Sonic Superstars have done to make the game stand out much more visually? I'm not the first to bring this up, but I most definitely agree with the idea that this game should have been 2D animated, not pixelated or 3D. We've already got an intro and outro cutscene that looks really good and a highlight of the game for me, so why not go all the way with it? It would probably cost a lot more, yes, especially for the boss fights, but I think it would have been a perfect and natural evolution of the classic 2D pixelated style, and would most definitely be remembered to this day. Heck, doing this may have led to the bosses being much less ambitious and annoying, so it's a win-win situation for me. Again though, I don't think this specific style was a bad choice per se, just not the preferred one in a perfect world. One thing I haven't mentioned about the game that is quite imperative to its identity is the multiplayer. I don't have a lot of experience with the multiplayer of this game, but I did play it with one of my younger cousins a good while back and I remember enjoying it. It was probably mainly because of the insanity of it, to be clear. I remember the camera moving all over the place with lots of crazy stuff going on. That's really where the story ends though. It was fun, and not much more. I think Sonic Team expected this to be the main selling point of the game, but like, Mario's been doing it since 2009, come on. There's also this battle mode thing in the menus which I refuse to touch because of similar bad stories mentioned from others. Let's get out. Well, I think it's about time we talk about the music, as there's literally no other topics to bring up. This soundtrack is extremely mixed. It's the only one which I would understand disliking out of them all, because it leans way too far into the Genesis sound chip. It's not that the sound chip is bad, there's a lot of bangers that came from the classics, and I get that it makes the songs sound like they came from those games, but come on! CD did its own thing, Mania did its own thing, why couldn't the composers have just moved on from that thing and used way more interesting instruments? This leads to a good amount of mid-songs, some straight up bad, but there are a few exceptions which are quite good, and most of them don't use the Genesis sound chip, funny how that works. Let's begin with... Bridge Island Act 1 is nice and happy, kicking off the adventure real nicely. Hey look, the composer of Sonic Mania worked on the best songs in this soundtrack, one of those being Speed Jungle Act 1. It feels right out of that game, man, it's so bumpy and hype, give it a whirl. Pinball Carnival Act 1 is a song I listened to before the game was out, thanks to the official upload, and I really loved it then, and I still do. It's just got a real snazzy vibe I enjoy, man. Lagoon City Act 2 is another great one from T-Lopes, giving off huge Press Garden vibes. Super atmospheric and chill, I love it. Sand Sanctuary Act 1 goes in a lot of unique places for a sand level, pretty much using every sandy trope to its fullest potential. You never guess who made this one too. Cyber Station Act 1 is wonderfully electronic, fitting a cyber's world perfectly. Frozen Base Act 2 is very reminiscent of a snowball fight. It brings back fond memories you may not even have. The special stages have some catchy tunes. It feels great whilst you're swinging all over the place. Unfortunately, that's about all the songs I want to cover. There's a lot more songs in the game, some of them even quite good. I just don't feel like the rest warrant a mention though. Be wary of what you choose to listen to, however, as you may end up in Genesis sound chip hell. That's really all I have to say about the game though, so let's end this. Sonic Superstars is most definitely a good game. Sometimes it's a really good game, in fact. However, there are so many aspects holding it back from true greatness, which pains me to see. So many good ideas squandered, so many strange design decisions, and a good amount of fundamental problems stop me from saying, I love this game. All I can really say is that it's a fun time. Try it out if you have nothing else to do and it's on sale for like 10 quid at most. Origins and Mania are far better deals than this game, and despite me most definitely enjoying this game overall, I would not mind ever playing it again. I do not mean any malice out of my words, I'm just being blunt about it. I really hope the developers can look at what went wrong here and make something truly worth living alongside all other 2D Sonics in the future. That's it from me. We've now covered all the games I do not have a ton to talk about. Everything else from here will likely be completely passion-filled, so stay tuned. See you then, goodbye.